Okay. And then should we start?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Awesome. We'll give it a few minutes. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the fundraising webinar. We're just going to give it a few more minutes for folks to join us. Okay, everyone, I think we'll get started. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for Long Island Sound Community Impact Fund's fundraising webinar. My name is Shahela. I'm with Restore America's Estuaries, and we have here Connor Yukaitis. So just a brief intro on Connor. He is the development director for the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters, a statewide environmental nonprofit based in Hartford. He has been there for 4 years and has written and secured countless grant proposals at a variety of funding levels, from a few $100s into the hundreds of dollars. He also developed the organization's 4-year strategic plan that outlines the vision, goals, and mission of CTLCV's work. His prior experience includes working for a number of political campaigns where he both fundraised and helped shape their respective campaign platforms. He volunteers as the fundraising coordinator for Jericho's Project, a Massachusetts-based nonprofit dedicated to trauma healing and the successful reentry of incarcerated citizens. So really excited to have this webinar, and it will be recorded and uploaded along with the slides on our website shortly after. And if you have any questions or comments, you can use the chat box below to put those concerns, and Samaya and I will look out for that. And so I'll pass it on to Connor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Shahela. It's great to see everyone here. Thank you for attending. I am just going to quickly share my screen and get the slideshow going that I've put together for you. Shahela, I just want to make sure that everyone should be able to see that.
Yeah, we can see everything.
Perfect. Okay, great. So yeah, the purpose of this training is to basically provide really a general overview on how to build a fundraising program at your nonprofit. You may be at various stages, in your nonprofit's growth. You also, I imagine, various sized nonprofits as well in terms of staff, budget, etc. So this is really this applies to everyone. So we'll kind of just go through a bunch of different things. Just interesting note. I don't know if any of you have read the Chronicle of Philanthropy before. I'll refer to it later on in the slideshow too, but it's a great resource. You have to pay an annual subscription, but it's a really great, they send monthly magazines essentially about fundraising. And when I first started here, they said it can take up to 3 years to make a successful, thriving development program. So no matter where you are, just know that it can take a while, but it's all for a good cause. For some quick housekeeping, I figured I would introduce you to the donor cycle, where there are 5 different terms that I will be using throughout this slideshow. You may have heard of them before, but in case you haven't, we have identification. So that's when you're actually identifying prospective donors, as well as current donors that you might have that you think may be able to elevate their gift and give more. We have qualification. That's where you determine whether the prospects that you have identified are likely to give after cultivation. So, you might have a big list of 100 prospects. Of that, you may find that only, 70 would be a good fit for your group. Then we have cultivation. That's where you're communicating with your prospects and engaging them with your organization's mission. So you do this, probably through emails, phone calls. You can send them mail, letters in the mail. They'll attend events and then setting up face-to-face meetings. Then we have solicitation. That's the most important part. That's where you're actually asking for the donation. So you've seen them a few times, you've spoken with them. Now the solicitation is the actual, hey, please give me $100. And then finally, we have stewardship. That comes after you've made the ask and they give you money. And essentially, you're building the relationship with a donor to keep them engaged and upgrade their giving, hopefully upgrade their giving. And you may also be able to tap into their networks as well to identify more prospective donors. You may be, if you're a brand new organization, you may be thinking, where do I go to find people who want to donate? We'll talk more about that in a bit, and with regards to board members, but your existing donors, if they're giving to you quite a bit, it's always helpful to ask them to, maybe reach out to their networks. Moving along, if you have never done this before, you'll definitely want to develop a fundraising plan, and you want to do this on an annual basis. It depends. Sometimes, if you're doing a special project or like a capital campaign, you might want to develop a specific fundraising plan for that. but as an organization, you should have a general fundraising plan that's updated every year. The key components to building a fundraising plan, your vision, mission, and values really want to drive that plan, so that they want to be consistent themes throughout, what you're doing. You want to set up a measurable and attainable funding goal for your organization. So it's important to know that, after you've looked at your budget, your staff, everything like that, how much do we want to raise? It could be $100,000, it could be $10,000. It's really up to you. Then you want to identify your main sources of income, and we will get to those sources of income in a bit. There's, a couple of different, for every organization, there's usually kind of 4 or 5 main sources of income that you can utilize. Then you want to determine specific action items and objectives to achieve your goal, your funding goal. And maybe you set those up, periodically, or maybe it's monthly or something like that. Then you want to develop a case for support documents. So those are going to be actually you've taken your mission and values and vision. You want to actually make maybe it's a double-sided flyer, maybe it's a postcard. You want to actually have like a donor packet ready. So when you meet with donors, you can give them something to take away. And then you want to set a timeline and calendar to carry out your plan and assign roles. Maybe you have a large development staff, so you can divvy it out. The executive director should always be playing, a role in your overall fundraising. Maybe you're just a staff of one, which I've been there before, and it's a lot of work. But you just want to make sure you're organized and you have maybe quarterly goals as well, monthly goals, weekly goals, etc. And then you want to create a budget. And I believe there's a separate training that's going to be coming up, taught by someone else about a budget. So we won't really dive into that because that's certainly unique to your organization. So let's talk about the mission and values for a moment. So, most important thing is to sell your organization to a donor. Fundraising is a lot like sales, except you're really not selling anything tangible, right? So the person is going to give you money and not necessarily, maybe they're not getting like a tangible item back or a product. You're really selling them on an idea. And so really it's important to practice storytelling. And I know we did the first training I did really kind of dove into storytelling. So I would encourage you all, if you did not attend that, I know it was recorded, so check that out. But practice storytelling, with your staff and with your board. Ask each other, why are you here? Why, what is it about this organization or this project that makes me want to work for it? And how do I sell that to a donor? It always becomes more personable too, when you have a personal story. And then you want to develop a vision statement. So this is that handout I referred to earlier. It really explains your organization's, mission, and then the fundable opportunities. So you might have like a couple of different things. Hey, for, $100,000 or for $10,000, you can, build a bridge or something in a park. Whatever that is, just really think about, what, in order to achieve your organization's goals, what are specific fundable opportunities that are appealing to a donor? And then always use testimonials and anecdotal evidence from other donors. So maybe you have a couple top donors that really love your organization. They're donating a lot. They're donating consistently. You should give them a call and see if they would be willing to write kind of their story that you can use that appeals to other donors. Donors love hearing other donors' experiences. Sell donations as an investment for furthering your cause. So again, they're not getting like a tangible product back. They're investing in the future of wetlands or the future of this beach or something like that. So you really want to sell it as an opportunity and an investment for a donor. And then a good vision is emotionally driven and relatable. So, never be afraid to tug at the heartstrings. If any of you have seen World Wildlife Fund, they love to, send you cute pictures of animals and panda bears and things like that. I mean, it works. So always go after that emotional connection with a donor. Moving along to identifying top income sources. So the sources I had mentioned before, we have individuals, which consists of board contributions, membership, so kind of your lower dollar donors. Then you have middle donors, and then you have your major gifts, and those are the ones you'll end up. And I have slides on each of these as well, so we'll get to each of those. Then you have events. Maybe you're hosting, an annual gala, or a spring fundraiser or something like that. It might not even necessarily be specifically a fundraiser, but maybe your organization holds informational events. Those are still opportunities to raise some money. Even if you're not accepting donations at the event, you want to make sure you're keeping track of the people that showed up and reaching out to them at another time. Then you have institutional giving, and this really consists of foundation grants and then corporate grants. So we will get to those in a minute because there are certainly, kind of different strategies for each of those. So let's talk about board contributions. So your board is really, it should be the first place you go if you're a brand new organization, that's really the first place you go to get some funding, and then also to get prospects. So you should always be, ready, willing, and able to utilize your board. You should, if you don't have one already, you should discuss having a board to give get policy. This is really useful because it not only holds the board accountable for fundraising, but it gets them more involved. If they're donating, their money, they're more likely to donate their time and pay, closer attention to the functionalities of the organization. So board give get, it requires them to, either give a certain amount or to get that amount from elsewhere. So I provided an example. You could have a $2,000 board give get policy. The board member themselves writes a check for 1,000, and then they find two friends that give 500. Boom, they've met their annual give get. And then also it's important to have 100% board giving rate. So make sure that, and we've done this, I've done this on a board meeting before, towards the end of the year. If we don't have a board, 100% board giving, I will, just hold the meeting in awkward silence until they pull their checkbooks out. It's really important that they give something because when you go to apply, especially to grant funders, some grant funders will actually ask if you have 100% board giving. And if you don't, that might actually make or break whether or not you get funds. So, and then also, I would highly encourage you all, depending on the size of your board. I mean, even if it's a small board of 2 or 3 people, you really should have a board development or fundraising committee. Just same thing. That meets regularly throughout the year. Monthly is always great. To just make sure that you're staying on track of reaching your the goals that you've outlined in the fundraising plan. And it also gets people engaged. So we'll talk about that in a bit as well. Actually, on the next slide, here we go. Board Development Committee. So this is really important. So really, it consists of board members. You really should have your chair or co-chair involved in it, so that they can, report. You can also nominate, another board member to be the chair of that committee. And then you can also, I encourage you to think outside of your board. You can have non-members, and then certainly you want your development staff. Maybe you have a large staff or small staff, and you have your executive director as part of that too. It always helps. But yeah, it's a good combination of board, non-board members, and staff. This committee should really assist you in developing your annual fundraising plan. While the development staff person might be doing a lot of the writing, the development committee should really help like with the vision, setting the goals, etc., reviewing the development plan. They should also help identify prospects in all of the funding categories I mentioned. So never be afraid to ask, your development committee to, tap into their Rolodexes, reach out to friends and colleagues and things like that to try to raise some money. They should also assist in cultivation and stewardship. So, helping to write notes is a great thing for your development committee to do, especially at the end of the year. I always have my board members. I try to have the full board, assist with writing little personal, thank you notes, or, you're sending out a solicitation letter. It always helps to have like, literally pen to paper, personalized notes. And then the development committee should also regularly assess fundraising goals, as well as the calendar to ensure that, you're sticking to your plan. And maybe you're not for whatever reason. That's very common. Things come up, as you all know, nonprofits can be very stressful. They can be very unpredictable. So maybe you need to adjust your fundraising plan. That's totally fine. But it really should, you should be working with your development committee to make sure that you're all on the same page for whatever adjustments need to take place. And And then that development committee should create host committees as necessary for events that have high fundraising capacity and potential. So let's say you are hosting, a gala in, in October. You work with your development committee to talk about and form that event. But then you really should have a separate host committee of people that are meeting more regularly and are, only talking about that event. Moving along to individual giving. So members and middle donors. Um, Members should have the least amount of, personal attention, especially if you're a small staff. And we'll usually, you engage them through, mass emails, maybe mail solicitations or mail updates. They typically give smaller amounts, and you should work to elevate them kind of as a whole throughout the year. Try to increase the ask if you're sending out, numerous solicitations throughout the year. If you have members who give frequently, maybe they give a couple times a year, you should definitely consider them for monthly giving. Monthly giving is fantastic. It really, provides long-term sustainable revenue. It helps with your overall fundraising plan, so you can kind of plan ahead. Then our middle donors require a little more attention to keep them engaged. Less attention than major donors, which we'll get to. Consider this group your future major donors. So you want to be thinking a couple years ahead. Maybe this person has given a few times, they've attended your events. Now you're going to, come back with a much bigger ask. You can engage these people through attending events, maybe making phone calls to thank them or update them on their work. That's a great thing to have board members help with too, is just picking up the phone and saying, look, we had a great month. We were able to achieve this, this, and this. Maybe you're not making an ask on that phone call, but it really keeps them engaged and tees them up to make an ask at a later date. Now we get to our major donors. This is where most of your attention should be focused on. Major donors require individual solicitation and stewardship plans. So you really should, have an individual plan for each major donor. You should try to have at least 5 to 8 touches per year. So a touch is basically some sort of interaction with them. That includes phone calls. Maybe you send them something in the mail, emails, they've attended an event, and then you should definitely try to get at least one personal visit in with them a year. And if they're more engaged, you should certainly try to, do it a couple times a year. Utilize your board for help in identifying major donor prospects, as well as, stewarding them. So, again, having board members make phone calls to these major donors, thank them for being a major donor, then update them on some work. And you could potentially, depending on how engaged your members are and what the relationship is like, you could have board members make the ask for you. But it really depends. If it's a person that board member brought in, sometimes it makes more sense for that board member to make the ask rather than yourself. And then correspondence should always be personal. Add personal notes to thank you letters, solicitation letters, emails. I use a big donor database, and we'll talk about databases in a little bit. So we send out mass mailers, emails to like 12,000 people. But anytime I'm emailing a major donor, I just use my, my organization personal Gmail account, and it just makes it much more personal. And then personal face-to-face interaction with them should absolutely be the priority. Again, maybe you only get one in-person personal visit with them a year, but you should really look for other ways. Maybe you can connect with them via Zoom for 30 minutes just to update them on something. But the more face-to-face time you get and you build a rapport with them, the chances that are greater that you will keep them for the long term and that they will elevate their giving. Now you may be asking, well, how do I classify all these different donor levels? So a good rule of thumb, many fundraising consultants and people like that will tell you that, your low dollar donors, your members are between $1 to $999. Your middle is 1,000 to 24,000, 999, and then major donors are 25,000 plus. Now, I don't know the size of your organizations, but you may be seeing those numbers and saying, wow, like we don't even have anyone that has given $1,000. That's okay. For smaller organizations, this is customize these levels to how the income that you have and the donors that you have. So I actually like to talk about members and low dollar donors between $1 and $99. Middle donors are 100 to 999, and then major donors are $1,000 and up. The organization I work for, we have probably 1,000 donors and like 12,000 members, but the giving capacity, it more fits this. So really, kind of tailor those levels to how you see fit. Next, let's talk about events for a minute. So events are great for identification, cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. It's a great way to keep people engaged. You could make an ask at an event, even if it's not a fundraiser. You could do, we've often done pledge cards where you actually have, pledge cards at different tables. And maybe it's not a fundraising specific event, but if you have a guest speaker, or you're talking about an issue that really resonates with people, they might just, write a check right there, which is great. Um, so when you think about event revenue, this can come from ticket sales, sponsorships, which I absolutely love. And then you could do something like auction or raffles. Maybe you're selling some t-shirts or coffee mugs or something like that. But your really main driver for revenue should really come from ticket sales and sponsorships. A great rule of thumb, something to strive for when you're planning an event, you should try to have the ticket sales cover the event expenses. That way, if you're getting sponsorships, you're just, you're really just getting kind of long-term revenue, which is great. Because sponsors know that, while they're sponsoring that event, they know that hopefully the funding that they're providing you will help you achieve your goals in the long term. Events provide an opportunity to connect with donors, as well as identify new sources of income. So maybe you invite, your major donors, and a couple major donors show up and they brought friends. That's fantastic. Now you're expanding your network. Um, it also provides a chance to remind people of your mission, demonstrate your goals and values. So it's a great opportunity. Make sure board members are present too. It's a great reminder for them why they serve on the board. Events are very often, every time we have an event, we notice our board is just really energized and engaged. The next board meeting, people are, or right after the event, board members are reaching out to me. Hey, what can I do to help? So it's a great opportunity to add a little bit of energy to what you're doing. And then be sure to invite major donor and middle donors as well. And then maybe the most engaged members. It never hurts to invite all of your members, but maybe you're following up, personally with some of your more engaged lower dollar donors because you want to, they're engaged for a reason. You want to make sure they show up. And then, as we mentioned earlier, utilize your board development committee, when planning an event, and ideally consider forming a host committee separate of that, that focuses, meets. I'm hosting an annual awards in November, and we're already forming a host committee within our development committee, and that host committee is going to meet probably twice a month, and between now and November, and just talk for an hour about nothing other than this event. Let's move on to foundations and corporate giving. This has huge funding potential, but very often, especially smaller organizations, they don't really know where to look or how to get started. With foundations and corporate giving, this can take the longest to produce results. So it's important that you start this work early. And what you really want to do is build, what should be part of your fundraising plan is this consistent pipeline of prospective funders. So at any given time, you should be working on, one or two grant applications, but you should also have, 5 more that you're researching. And then maybe you have a meeting scheduled with a potential funder. So you always want to make sure that, you have a cycle going throughout the year. You should always consider community foundations. So depending on where your nonprofit is located, very often there's a couple of community foundations within your geographical area that fund, all kinds of different projects. Family foundations. There's no shortage of family foundations out there. Between in your geographical area, in your state, there are plenty of family foundations at the national level that will give, just kind of across the board. And corporations whose values align with your organization. So, you might be, if you're an environmental organization, you might think like, hey, REI has different, funding opportunities. Patagonia was huge. I know that, Patagonia CEO, I think a year ago, said he was going to, give all of his money away to charities. Well, that's a huge opportunity for you. So, don't be afraid to think outside the box as well when it comes to corporations. Again, utilize your board to help find opportunities. Very often, board members tend to serve on multiple boards, so they may have connections to foundations and corporations, especially family foundations. Those can be kind of harder to find. Community foundations, you typically hear about community foundations because they're actively trying to be engaged in the community. Sometimes family foundations are a bit more private. So, if you have a list of prospective foundations, you should try to find out who's on the boards of those foundations, and then you should share that list with your board, because they might say, "Oh, I know so and so. They're, the executive director of this foundation," and I mean that's a huge in right there. Then you should enlist some sort of grant research database, and we'll talk about that in a little bit when we get to the databases. But you should have some sort of, beyond, you should go beyond just kind of Google searching. So we'll talk about that in a little while. And then you should have a system to track grants as well as prospects closely. You should always know the grant cycles. So some foundations may have a rolling grant cycle, which is great. That essentially means there's no deadline. You can apply at any time of the year. So those are really nice. Maybe I always look at the grant cycles. If you have one that's coming up in like a month and then you have one that's deadline is just rolling, you should absolutely focus on the one that's coming up first. And then very often foundations maybe have quarterly or annual grant cycles. So it really just depends. Each one's different. And then you should keep track of all of the reporting deadlines as well as the key contact people, and check that regularly because contact people at foundations, they do change. I just applied for a grant last week. And I actually hadn't realized that the main staff person that I had met with and spoke on the phone a few times had left like a week prior. So when I went to reach out to her and ask her a question as I was developing my application, they were like, "Oh yeah, she left." So it's always important to keep an eye on things, and make sure that any staff changes you're keeping track of, so you know who to pick up the phone and call should you need to. So talking about fundraising organization, I had mentioned databases. Software pays dividends. They can be expensive, so depending on your budget, but it is definitely worth looking into. So for starters, I would recommend what's called a CRM. So that's a customer relationship management software. So that's like your main database. That's what tracks all of your communications, keeps track of all your donors, keeps track of, individuals have, their own profile, which is contact information. You can add notes about your last phone call. It's just a really, really great way to keep everything organized. So some examples, and you may have these already, or you may have heard of them, but we have, Salesforce is a very common one. Every Action is actually the one I personally use, and it just got recently bought by a company called Bonterra. So if you're Googling CRMs, I think I tested this out earlier, and it looks like they're just calling it Bonterra now. Virtuous, there's plenty of ones out there. I mean, there's some I've never even heard of, but there's probably like 15 to 20 pretty commonly used CRMs. So check them out. You can always schedule a demo, if you don't have one right now, or maybe the one you have right now isn't working too well and doesn't best suit your needs. You can always reach out and get a free demo from any of these companies. And their demos are typically really, really useful because they very often enlist, former development people and fundraising people, so they can speak your language. It's really nice. Um, I would also recommend, trying to get some sort of grant research database. A few examples include Grant Hub, Candid, Grant Station, Instrumental, and then as I mentioned at the beginning, the Chronicle of Philanthropy. This is definitely I think the cheapest out of all the ones I listed here, because the Chronicle of Philanthropy, I think you pay, depending on the organization, it's like $150 or $200 a year for a subscription to the Chronicle. But you also get access. They have a grant database online. So you can go online, you log in, you can search, a bunch of different grants by all kinds of criteria, by, the issues of environmental grants or democracy grants. Then you can also filter it by state, which is really useful. And then if you have the money, and are able to, I would certainly recommend looking into wealth screening and prospecting software. So I use Wealth Engine, and it's basically, it's really good. So if you have a big list already as an organization of, members and donors and things like that, you can run them through Wealth Engine, and it takes from a bunch of different data points and is able to tell you, this person is estimated to be worth this amount. And on an annual basis, they typically give, $5,000 a year to organizations. It's really, really useful before you meet with them, especially major donors, to get a sense of how much they give, because it makes when you're making a specific ask of a person, you certainly don't want to pull a number out of a hat because it could come out of left field. They may say, "Oh my God, if you ask someone for $10,000 and they're like, I don't have anywhere near that amount of money." You want to know that going into it. So Wealth Engine, iWave is another one. They're just really, really great tools to help you get a better sense of, who you're talking to and how much is an appropriate ask. Um, so with that, I will leave it to questions, and I'm also going to stop sharing my screen so I can take a look at the chat. I'm not sure if there are questions during that time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Connor. That was an excellent presentation. If you have any questions, you can use the Q&A chat option on the bottom, and we can take questions. I'll give a few minutes for that. And I noticed some folks come in a little later, so this will be uploaded to our website, and it is being recorded in case you missed the first portion of it.
Now, I would also say too, if anyone has ideas, because Shahela and I have talked about, hosting another training. So if there's, this one was purposely intended to be relatively broad and kind of hit on kind of the key parts of a fundraising strategy as an organization. If there's anything that sticks out that you would like to learn more about, maybe it's how do I build a fundraising plan? So if there's anything like that, feel free to drop that in the comments too. We'd love to hear your feedback.
Okay, I think we have one question. So Tim Glenn asked, typically, how much is CRM software? It's a great
Um,
question.
yeah, it depends. It can be in several $1,000s, on an annual basis. It depends on the type of like what company you're going through. Sometimes they have like very scaled back versions of their software that might be cheaper. You also might want to consider if there are a couple other organizations that you work with, you could approach them kind of as a group, and they might offer you, like a group rate. So, for instance, I'm with the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters, and there are many states that have leagues. There's also a national league, and the national league actually works with every action because we all use it and we get a cheaper rate. So if you're able to work with another nonprofit, I would certainly recommend reaching out to them and see if they'd be interested in something like that.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else have any other questions? Give it a few more minutes.
Yeah. And I would also say on the CRM front and just the databases in general, they typically do want to work with you. So they might have like a fixed rate that you might see on their website. Maybe it's too much. I would still recommend and urge you to set up a demo and talk with them because they understand that nonprofits come in all kinds of, shapes and sizes. They really will go out of their way to work with you on that. So.
There's another question. Are there freelancers that you can hire to help build on and said that be in a fundraising plan?
Yes, there are all kinds of development and fundraising consultants. There are some big national firms that I've worked with before, but there are also smaller ones. They're also, I mean, they're all over the place, so you might want to look around and give preference to someone who's local because maybe you're dealing with local issues. They might have a better sense. If you're dealing with someone local, they might also come with like a whole wealth of donors and connections in your area. But yeah, just do a Google search. I mean, there's plenty of different fundraising consultants. It's a very big business.
And I will say, some of you guys might have already heard this, but we are planning for the annual learning exchange on June 27th. And that's also an opportunity to do some in-person training, networking, And it seems like there is an interest and need. So we can definitely have Connor come to that and do a workshop in person if that's something that you're interested in. And Tim said, thank you.
Certainly.
Any other questions before we close out or
I
comments?
I was just going to emphasize the fact that I am available, after this presentation. I don't know how many of you were on the previous trainings that I did, but I've had a few people reach out since then and ask, questions about strategic plan. Do you have resources or connections to something? I'm always available. My email that was up on the screen, but it's Connor, CONNOR at ctlcv.org. So I'll just put that in the chat too. Feel free to reach out anytime, and maybe it's something that wasn't covered in this training, but I can certainly, provide a perspective.
And based on what you just said, Connor, it seems like there might be a need for just a strategic planning webinar or, a workshop around that. So that's something also that we can do. Um, I feel like there are no more questions, but you have Connor's information, you have my information. In case if you think of anything else, please contact us. Tim said yes, I would definitely attend that.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we could start planning that for sure. Strategic planning, I will warn you all. It is a fun process. It's exciting, but it can be very draining and take a long time. It depends on how engaged your board is, how big your staff is and your programs and stuff. But it took my organization about 2 years to develop a strategic plan, and that included, many board meetings, many internal staff meetings, things like that. So we could certainly plan a training around that and kind of dive into that in more detail.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for coming this afternoon, listening to the Fundraising webinar. It'll be uploaded on our website shortly. My email, Connor's email, is in the chat. And thank you so much, Connor, for another great webinar.
Yeah, thank you. I always enjoy being here and sharing some knowledge with everyone. So
All right, everyone, have a good day. Bye.
thank you so much.